appreciate the support. I'm going to be doing a presentation on introduction to game design. So let's get started. This is a famous quote from a game in 1986, Legend of Zelda. So my name is Matthias, and I do art, music, and game design. One of the recent projects that I worked on was Chrono Gnome. It's about a time-traveling gnome who has to go back in time, get some seeds, and plant them in a garden in the future, so that the old lady can pass on her garden to her grandchild. It's an interesting game. It was for game jam with Pig Squad, and they do annually like these different game jams with different themes, and you're going to make a game in a week with a team of people, and it's really hard, and there's a lot of time crunch, and it's a really fun process at the same time. So what is a video game? A video game is an interactive experience that is meant to immerse you into an alternate reality. You can see a lot of, you might notice a few up here. My favorite, personally, Legend of Zelda. Link is awesome. He has a sword and he goes around killing monsters and saving the princess. So if you're looking to create a game, you have to think about what's possible. There's certain questions that you can ask yourself, like who's on your team? Are you working on this by yourself? What's your timeline for completion? How complex is the game going to be? And then you have to take all of these answers that you formulated and you think, okay, what is realistic? Like, if I'm making a game by myself and I want to finish in 2 weeks, but it's going to be super complex, there's going to be beautiful art, I want the person to be really involved and there's a lot of buttons to press, it's probably not a realistic goal to shoot for. So you really have to kind of declare the scope of what your project is going to be in the very beginning. And that being said, if you have a huge team or you have a lot of time personally and you want to spend 7 years just producing this perfect game, that's totally possible. It's just going to take time and energy. So to build a team, these are the different aspects of that. You have the producer who oversees the project. They're also the sort of communication with clients, sales teams. They organize meetings and make sure that the project is on track. This is very helpful to have so that you know what milestones you're hitting and what your goals are, and they keep everything realistic for the group. The designer, which isn't necessarily fashion designer or visual designer. They are designing the game and how the user interacts with the game. So they create the puzzles for the game, develop the different ideas, how you beat the game, how you win, how the player is going to really get immersed into this experience. Artists for all of the art, making beautiful scenery and really developing a style. Programmer who understands the programming languages that they use to actually implement these features into the game. Oftentimes you use a development kit like Unity or something, and the programmer is going to have to also understand how this software works entirely. And that's going to help the game get produced a lot quicker if they can use these engines. Even if you understand programming but you don't understand the game engine, it could be very hard to create a game just because you're creating everything from scratch. Sound engineer, all of the sound effects, music, voiceovers, and then testers, people who will play the game and make sure it actually works and is fun, which is very important. Oops. So, high concept, this is the first stage. This is the point where you get all the sticky notes all over the table and you just have pens, everyone's sitting in a circle, brainstorming ideas. Emphasis on Red Bull and snacks. You want that creative energy, so this is important. So in the first stage, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You're just brainstorming. You come up with ideas for the game. There's going to be a lot of good and bad ideas, so don't get too attached to the good ideas. Like, if you're really set on one, that can disrupt the whole flow of everyone else's creativity. You know, you really want to be open to what everyone is contributing. You might be able to make a really cool game if you go with someone else's ideas. So stay open. And then, you know, this isn't going to be the first game. There's many other games that you could create, so keep some of the good ideas if you want. And also, it's not going to be the last iteration of the game. So it will keep evolving over time. So 1 or 2 sentences, what is the game about? These are the things that you're going to be writing on sticky notes. Storm the castle, take the treasure back to the base. Super easy. These are all separate ideas, by the way. Level up your character by fighting monsters and beat the boss. Find all the matching items before time runs out. It's like straight to the point. This is the core concept, the goal of the game. This is the first thing that you want to declare. Don't overcomplicate it, and set your direction so that you have a general idea of where you're going. It's going to change though, so don't worry if it switches up later on. All right, so these are a couple examples that I pulled for video games. You might notice some of them or all of them if you're a nerd like me. So we got Minecraft. High concept for Minecraft. Collect stuff and survive. That's literally probably what they wrote down, like, oh, this is what I want the game to be about. All the rest of it got developed around that one idea. So you have Tetris. For this one, create rows of blocks and don't let them stack to the top. Pac-Man, eat dots, don't get hit by the enemies. Dark Souls, this one looks complicated because it's really developed. There was a high production value on this one. This guy's throwing some supercharged lightning thing and there's a big monster here, but really what it comes down to is you fight monsters, you get more powerful, and you beat the boss. Mario Kart, race your friends to the finish line. League of Legends, choose different characters to defeat the enemy team and their base. Super simple ideas. These are the high concepts. Concept stage, so this is after the concept. This is when you're starting to establish more about what the game is about, where it takes place, the genre, what the user is actually going to experience in the game. Core mechanics, concept art, colors, style, just a bunch of different ideas for what you want to build around this core concept. At this stage, you're probably also going to implement some of the features in a working program so that you can test to see how it's going so far, what the game's going to be like in the end. And this is a really fast process. You want to be going quick at this stage because any time you waste doing stuff that's not going to be implemented is a lot of time wasted. All right, here is some concept art. This is a pretty high production. This is kind of an example of what you would find in probably a very big production, a team with 50 or more people on it. This is going to give you an idea of what the environment is like, what the mood is like. This is what will give you an idea of, you're going to get an idea of what the music is going to sound like and how the player might interact with the environment. So concept artist has a lot of creative freedom at this point, and it's really going to impact how the game comes out. I don't know, this one might be hard to see in this lighting, but essentially it's like a ruined castle inside, and the idea for this game I think would be, it's kind of like a platform game where it really shows off the art and the environment and you just kind of walk back and forth. There are games that really immerse players just with simple controls like that. So that's another style of game design this was some concept art for our game. We were doing it in a week, so some of these concepts actually became assets later on, like that tree. It's just kind of just so you can get a feel for what the game is going to be like in the end. All right, game design documents. So we're progressing. Now we have some prototypes, we have the art, we have an idea of what's going to go down in this game, like how the player is going to interact with the world. So at this point, you need to document all of that. Creating a detailed outline of gameplay elements, like the art style, the environment mood, what buttons you're going to interact with. This is all really important in creating a direction for everyone to follow, because everyone's going to have access to this game design document, and they'll be able to see what they need to work on, what it's going to be like, and they'll really be able to get specific with that work. It's often written before major production, but it's something that's called a living document, so it's going to evolve throughout the whole process. It might change dramatically. It might have stuff removed from it, but ultimately it's just going to always be evolving. And these are some examples of what will be on that. The whole story is just going to be laid out for you. There'll be lists of the different sounds, assets that you need. Then people can kind of get an idea of what they need to do. Prototype. So at this stage, you're starting to get an idea of what the game looks like. You have a player on there, they can move around. The game probably breaks constantly because it's just super buggy, but you still can like progress through something. Programmers are going to be testing algorithms like how the jump mechanic's going to work. You need to figure out how high they jump so that the artist knows how big of a platform they need to create, things like that. And oftentimes programmers, while they're testing this, they're going to use placeholder graphics. So just free graphics that they find, or draw little boxes in paint or something and just implement them really fast so that they can test the actual features of the game. These are usually really easy to implement. They're going to be quick, and you have to follow a schedule. So don't implement too much to handle. You don't want to be working on a ton of art and then send it over to a developer and say, look, this is all the stuff that we got to implement. And he's like, well, I'm still working on this one thing over here and I haven't finished it yet. So at this point, the programmer is overloaded with stuff to do and the artist has already wasted time producing a bunch of other stuff. So it's really important to stay on schedule and just like keep it bare bones. Only what you need, just make the game fun and functional. And so new ideas that build on already existing mechanics. Here's an example of some of the concept art that I showed you. So this is kind of what we wanted our game to look like. And to describe how you interact with the environment, I made up this image, which you can see there's some pink platforms here. That means that the orange block can collide with them, and the blue one, it's just going to move through them. So the programmer knows, oh, okay, I can jump on this branch here. And that probably means that there's going to be higher platforms. So this is going to be a platformer game, and this is how the player is going to interact with it. These are the sort of things that will be sketched up in the prototyping stage so that everyone understands how the game works. Production. This is the main stage. All hands on deck. Tasks are delegated. Everyone knows what they're doing. Or maybe they don't. That's also very possible. Assets. Those are the main pieces and parts that can be easily duplicated and reused. So all of those trees that you can jump on, there's going to be different ones. Programmers have to implement those features and then pair those with the game objects that they've created. So this is the point where you're merging different tasks and actually implementing them into a game. Then you can start to build a compelling story around what is already in place, get the sound and music for the mood, and then you start to really see the game come together at this point. It is totally broken. Still, at this point, there's going to be major bugs and issues, and you're going to like walk on a certain block, and the whole game is just going to crash. That's totally normal at this stage. But the point is to just get a basic idea of the game, start bringing all of those pieces together. Level design, that's something that comes a little bit later, and the game designer is going to be working on that constantly. They are going to be using the mechanics that are already implemented to decide how the player is going to progress through the game. A huge part of it is design meetings, course correction, task delegation, reporting progress. It's important to meet up with your team, come back together, figure out what you need to do next, so people aren't straying off on their own path. Some of the things that you can use actually for this, there's this software. It's a project management software that we use called Trello. It's essentially a bunch of columns, and you can like put tasks in the columns, and then everyone can be a collaborator and move those tasks over as they complete them. So you can see the workflow and like how people are doing, what progress they're making. You can comment on stuff to be like, oh, I need this sound. I'm implementing a jump, so it needs to be able to like, you need to hear something when they jump, stuff like that. And it's really important so that everyone can stay on track together. We also use Discord for remote work, so we can all communicate. And then we did have a lot of meetings throughout the week. And this is all just like, this is a very specific type of team. We had about 7 people, so it was easier. We had more creative freedom as a group, and we could still collaborate on stuff and work as a team, but it wasn't like everyone was overloaded with so many tasks, or like in a major production setting where your tasks are already laid out. They're going to be like, look, this is what you need to do, and here's exactly how you do it, so just get it done by the end of the week. And you aren't going to have a lot of creative freedom. But in this instance, we had to be really highly collaborative and always in communication. So those are some cool tools to use. Crunch time. Every game has it. And oftentimes, if you're working for a big game design company, they're going to expect that you're unpaid and working overtime, because there's going to be tons of stuff that's not done yet at the very end. So for us, we were doing this as a hobby. It wasn't like a paid project, so we were fine just pulling all-nighters. But if you're working like as a career, if your career is in game design, you're not going to want to be pulling all-nighters for a company unpaid. Like that's not cool, but it's gonna happen. So if you're interested in that line of work, just be expecting that sort of turnover time. It can be stressful. It can be really stressful at the end, and there are high expectations in that sort of setting. Also, though, take a deep breath. The game is going to keep being developed over time. This is just to get the game to a working state. So do whatever you can to make sure it works and do your best, but this is not the last time you're going to be working on it. You're still going to be working on it a lot. Testing. So this part happens actually a lot earlier than you'd expect. It's even in the concept stages where like you want people to be playing the game. You want to know if it's fun, because the idea of a game is that it's a fun experience for someone. So is it even playable? Like, is there something broken with the game that maybe you missed? For example, in our game, there was one bug that we found really late. It was like you pick up this one seed, and then there are also these flower seeds where if you switch the seed, it would drop another one behind a rock. That was not supposed to happen. It was supposed to just stay on the rock, but it would fall behind the rock, and then like you couldn't beat the game because you needed those seeds, but they were just gone. So that was a game breaker, and we didn't discover that until like crunch time. So those are the sort of things that having testers is going to be really important in finding. And your game might suck, so just be prepared to hear that. All right, release. This is the point where you may or may not have a stable game. These are some of the steps that you go through. To be honest, our game is still in the alpha stage. It's semi-broken, it works, it's functioning, like you can play it, there's a level, but we want to add more levels, we want more functionality, more buttons to press. The rules that we were working with for this jam specifically was you can only use 3 buttons. So we had to limit all of the functionality in the game to 3 buttons, which is really hard to do. Good example of that is Super Mario Bros. Left, right, jump. That's pretty much it. And we kind of modeled our game after those controls. So we're in alpha, but after that is beta. You know, you get more features, there's more functionality in the game, and at this point there's still a lot of bugs that you're trying to fix, but it's a pretty solid game at this point. Code release stage is where you're almost there. Like, there's the first stage of code release, and the game is functioning, still has minor bugs, but you're about to actually market it and put it up on Steam or whatever platform you want to do. Actually, just to clarify, there are games on Steam that are in alpha stages that you have to pay for. So there is a potential to make money with a not working game. That's kind of hard because then you have players that are expecting something from you. So they're going to want you to keep developing it. Usually I recommend getting closer to beta or maybe even code release so you have something stable to offer. But then again, I mean, there are games like Minecraft, they released it in alpha and they started charging in beta, I'm pretty sure, and they made millions of dollars. So Goldmaster, silly name, but that's what it's called in game design. Sounds like some Halo 2 ranking or something. This is when the game is just complete. This is how you're going to market it, and this is what you're going to upload. This is what you're going to give to the companies who actually sell it. These are some of the platforms that you can release on: Steam, Xbox, PlayStation marketplaces, itch.io. Our game is currently released on itch.io, and we're going for a Steam version, but we have to wait until we have more functionality or closer to a stable version. You can also pitch to investors and game dev companies if you have a working prototype and a fully filled out game design document. A lot of people develop a game by themselves and get it to a working stage, and then they actually pitch it. Game design company will buy it, and they'll completely redo it with a whole team of people. So this is, there's a lot of potential for people to make money as a game developer if you're pitching to investors. Let's see what time we got. Cool. Software development kits. All right, these are some tools that you can use. I don't recommend making games from scratch. It's really hard. You can use programming languages like JavaScript, Python, C#, any programming language you could use to make a game, essentially. But that means you're going to have to be building the whole engine from the ground up. So there are a lot of tools out here like Unity. They make it so easy to do physics. Like, you say, okay, this is the player object, and this is how I want it to move. And it's kind of laid out for you already. So they already have those scripts. They have those basically functions that already tell you how the game is going to work, and you can modify them accordingly. It's really hard to just go from scratch. Some of the ones up here that I recommend are Unity. And if you do want to try some more scratch type programming, Pygame's pretty good because they do have a lot of functions. It's more of a library of functions. It's not necessarily a full game design environment. Something like Unity is going to have a 3D environment or a 2D, whatever you want, but it's also going to have all these knobs and sliders that will adjust all of the properties for what you want to do. Some prototyping stuff, Game Maker Studio. I've seen games that are totally just completely released with Game Maker Studio, but it's like it has some limitations. It's not necessarily like a high quality game studio. Scratch is super basic. It actually has code blocks that you can drag and create like game loops in just by dragging objects around on the screen. Some of the art and pre-made assets. Pre-made assets are going to be open game art. A lot of programmers use pre-made assets because they don't do art, but they want to work on a game by themselves. So if you want to work on a game by yourself or you don't have an artist, that's a really good resource for getting completely royalty-free art that you can actually sell later on. I would be careful of licensing, though. Some of the art online that says, like, no, if you use some art, you have to make sure that the person that made it is actually willing to give it to you. There's some art on Open Game Art that you have to give credit to the artist, and then there's some that you don't have to give credit to the artist. So it's something to be aware of so you don't get any legal issues or anything like that. Otherwise, GIMP is free. Paint.net, that comes on Microsoft. You can use that to make art. It's not going to look as polished, but you know, Photoshop, also a professional art studio, so highly recommend those. Some sounds and music, freesound.org, everything is free. You can just use it for whatever. They have a lot of weird sound effects. Some music even, lots of like samples and loops. Splice, that's a subscription-based music platform, so you pay for a monthly subscription and then you can download music for your game. Of course, you know, you have other basic software. Ableton Live is pretty complex. If you're a sound producer, then you probably use something like Live. It costs a few $100s, so if that's not in your budget, you know, I'd stick to Freesound or like making clicks and like doing stuff on your phone. Like working with what you have is totally possible. You can make a great game with sound effects that you just recorded on your phone with your mouth. That's totally a legitimate thing. All right, this is our game. This is the first screen. I'll actually put it up so you guys can play it. It's a puzzle platformer where you can travel between past and present timelines to help a little girl recreate the fabled garden of her grandmother. So the goal is to solve these puzzles where you have to jump back in time, plant seeds, and then jump into the future. You travel through time by jumping on these mushrooms here, and things change over time, so you can actually get to other platforms and progress through the game. This is our team. To my brother Ben, he helped me with all of the art. He is an awesome artist, and it was really fun to work with him. We have Lauren, Sarah, myself, Jake, Johnny, Calvin. So we actually had a pretty solid team, like a full team, wide range of abilities, so we were able to do a lot of tasks really quickly. Our game was pretty polished for making it in 1 week, but altogether it was a really good experience. And if you want to get involved with something like this, I recommend going to Pig Squad. It's a nonprofit, and they just host these game jams. And if you want to get involved, it's all levels. Like, you don't have to know anything about game design to get on a team. They'll just help you like understand the process and, you know, try and get you involved in ways that you can understand. So they are having a meetup sometimes next month, I believe, and they're going to be doing another game session. So this time it's 2 weeks to create a game. And the rules are going to be a little different. This last one was 3 buttons and had a creative theme of 3 colors. So we chose the final flowers for the garden were going to be 3 colors. We didn't necessarily do a literal translation of the game, but there were some people there that made games that were only 3 colors, and it was like mind-blowing. Like, how do you only use 3 colors when your game is highly detailed? But that was not the route. All right. So if you guys want to play the game, I think I have a controller, so you can just test it out and give me some feedback if you want to. Like I said, it's still broken and like still in the beginning stages, but we're producing it over time. So thank you all for coming out today. You guys want to play it?